Go.
Alright, well, the title of our presentation is Mahatma Gandhi, an Act of Civil Disobedience. I'm Tyler Shoemade.
I'm Kelsey Diddle.
I'm Lindley Mamonis. And I'm Shauna Lee.
As we began our research, we really had no idea where to go, so since we were Group Gandhi, we were like, okay, well, we'll just go Gandhi. Well, as we were doing our research, we came across this term civil disobedience and the concept of civil disobedience. So that's kind of how our point for our case study kind of changed. So I'm going to read you the definition. Civil disobedience is the active, professed refusal to obey certain laws, demands, and commands of a government or of an occupying international power. Civil disobedience is commonly, though not always, defined as being nonviolent resistance. And civil disobedience and the concept, like the way we have it in our presentation, is all passive resistance. It's all based on passive resistance, which is nonviolence. The goal of civil disobedience being to change laws or the voids of society, so segregation laws or segregation in general. And then civil disobedience dates back all the way to 460 BC, so that's obviously a pretty long time ago. Like the ancient Greeks and Greek tragedies is where that kind of started. So I'm just going to give you some examples. Everybody knows the story of Rosa Parks, how she sat in the white section of the bus. And she was asked to move, but she refused, so she indeed went to jail. Martin Luther King then kind of got involved, and the Montgomery bus boycott started, and that was all an act of civil disobedience to try to change something. In this case, it was the laws of public transportation, and after a while, it did indeed get proven that these laws were unconstitutional. And Gandhi, his whole life is kind of based on civil disobedience and passive resistance, but just an example, one of his bigger acts of civil disobedience, I guess you could call it, was the British Salt Acts, and they were not letting them buy or sell salt, so what they did is they marched up there and were making salt from the sea as kind of like, disobeying the government and saying how like that doesn't faze them. They can still get their salt.
So, as Tyler previously mentioned, we were Group Gandhi, so we decided to take him and kind of run with it. So, as him kind of being the basis of where our research started, we wanted to give you a little bit of background. And Gandhi actually returned to India from South Africa in 1915. Where he took over and radically changed the Indian nationalist movement. There were three great popular movements that he led that ultimately wore down the British government, which led to Indian independence. And he did this through passive resistance, which in simpler terms is non-cooperation or disobedience without violence. Kind of would be non-communication or victimization. He was thrown in jail on multiple occasions, but really the one that kind of was his turning point was in 1893 when he was on a train and they had the segregation rules, and he didn't comply with them, so he was thrown off. And it was kind of his turning point where he said, I'm done, I'm tired of this, I want to stand up for what I believe in and I want to change things. We feel that Gandhi laid the groundwork, kind of paved the way for leaders today who still kind of follow what we feel started. Like it happened date back all the way to BC, and we feel that he pushed it further. He pushed it to the point where people noticed it more and were more involved. And like I said, many people based their ideas off him. Like Martin Luther King, he went to India and he studied his ways, and he wanted to kind of, in a sense, model what he did and push it. And many of the tactics that he used are still used today. Like he would do speeches, or they would sit quietly, or he would go on hunger strikes, or at one point he would just actually, at one point, the whole, basically his life, he would not reject the British attire, and he would just kind of wear what he felt like it.
Alright, we had Gandhi, of course, and when Tyler said that, we went in not knowing anything, so when we saw civil disobedience a lot, we decided to just go with that. We think our question is civil disobedience a necessity today? And we kind of thought that since like people in the past did so much with civil disobedience, we don't really, like, it was more accepted when civil rights were going on. It still happens today, but it's not like shown, like it's not broadcasted as much. And we think that since so many people like fought for what they wanted, it's like we don't have to do as much as they did. We came up with that there was a fine line between civil disobedience and selfish acts. We think that the civil rights movement was built on civil disobedience. We think that since like all the things that they did, that's the reason why like we got civil rights. And like I said, that there's a fine line between doing something that's going to benefit like everybody as a whole and then just selfish acts towards government. For example, there was a man in Chicago that convinced a jury that a criminal act is okay if the intent of the offender is to prevent a greater harm. We kind of went with this because it's like saying that since like we feel like someone's a harm to like our society, that we're gonna like just murder someone and then like it's better for everybody else. And we thought that they're trying to determine their thoughts, so that would be like a selfish act instead of going about it the right way for civil disobedience.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about like the reasoning for civil disobedience, and we came to like think that like, segregation laws and women's rights followed a lot of what people did, like with Gandhi. So we said that when people fought for segregation laws, people did this because they believed that they were equal to whites and that they should be allowed all the same rights as them, and that they shouldn't have to have like separate bathrooms and drinking fountains and have to go to different schools. And then I found a couple examples, and there's a boycott in February 1960 to April 1961, and it was a student protest in South Carolina, and their goal was to desegregate schools and businesses. And then I also found another one that was in 1968 in Orangeburg, and there was a segregation protest going on at a bowling alley, and there were actually 3 people that were killed and 27 were injured. And these are 2 examples that aren't really well known with like the segregation laws and everything, but they also played a very key role in the progress that was given that allowed African Americans to have equal rights in the U.S. Some more well-known demonstrations were like the Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott and the Freedom Rides. And whenever like these demonstrations ended in violence, it kind of just gave the people like stronger, like made them stronger and led them to fight more to gain what they thought they believed in. And eventually they won, and they didn't give up until they did. And then with the women's rights, they just wanted to be able to not be like housewives anymore, and wanted to have all the same rights as men and be able to vote and go to work. And they did a lot of the same things that like the African Americans did in the segregation. They did different like protests and demonstrations. And there's women that are still struggling today in other countries. They want equal pay. They're suffering through discrimination and from poverty because they aren't getting paid as much as the men are getting paid, but they're still working like equal hours. But the women in the U.S. are fortunate that they won the battle and were given the same rights as men. And even now, women are starting to do this again, like in regards to abortion and standing up for what they believe in. And that leads us into like our present day with abortion and marriage equality. You can see people like standing up for what they believe in and fighting for like civil disobedience. And for abortion, they're protesting and boycotting, and there are many ads and campaigns that are everywhere regarding abortion. And this shows that like the battle is still being fought and proves that there are still people fighting for civil disobedience. And the same goes for marriage equality. People across the nation are fighting for marriage equality through protest. And these protests work and is now legal in 17 states, while 3 allow public or domestic partnerships. And recently they used Facebook with their red like equal sign, and they like encouraged people to change it, and it drew like a lot of attention to them. So it was just a way that they used as like a different demonstration to like gain attention. And I can see these protestings continuing until like there's equality across all the states. And then in conclusion, some of us, we have different views on civil disobedience, and some of us believe that it's necessary for like people's voices to be heard on like different controversial and important issues, and that they stand up and like fight for what they believe in like the others did in the past. And then some of us believe that it's not necessary to like fight for what you believe in because civil leaders in the past already like laid the groundwork for it. But we like all together believe that it's not happening as often now because like the government has more power, so they have more say like what's going on. And then these are our references.